I still remember the weight of that evening pressing down on me, as though the very air inside Josh's new Denver home had thickened. My brother stood at the center of his living room, eyes sparkling with the anticipation of a performance, raising his glass to command the room. I had seen that expression on his face so many times before, whenever he wanted to steal the spotlight, whenever he felt the need to be larger than life, even if it came at someone else's expense. To new beginnings, new homes? He began, his voice ringing out with practiced charm. Then he paused, milking the silence for drama before adding, and to Grandpa's memory. A hush fell over the crowd. It had only been 4 days since we buried him, and the wound of his absence still ached raw in my chest. I raised my glass, quietly honoring the man who had taught me more about love, patience, and resilience than anyone else. But Josh wasn't finished. Speaking of Grandpa, he continued, placing his drink on the coffee table with a deliberate flourish. I have an announcement to make. My stomach clenched as I watched him slip an envelope from his pocket, its edges frayed as though handled too many times. He looked at me briefly, just long enough to stir a gnawing unease in my gut. Before he died, Grandpa gave me this letter, Josh declared, his voice swelling with pride. He wanted me to have his vacation home by the lake, the place we all loved as kids. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and warm congratulations rippled through the family. My parents beamed with pride, their faces alight with joy for their eldest son. Josh's girlfriend, Teresa, clapped her hands together as though he had just won a great prize. Across the room, my cousin Jenna caught my gaze, her brows knitting in confusion. She knew how close Grandpa and I had been, how I had poured weekends and years into maintaining that lakeside cabin, how it was the place where my soul seemed to rest. But now Josh was claiming it as his own. I sat frozen, the chatter around me fading into a dull roar. That cabin was not just a property. It was Grandpa's heart, his legacy, our shared sanctuary. I could still feel the rough wood of the dock beneath my legs as he taught me to fish, the warmth of his arm draped across my shoulders, as he pointed out constellations glittering over the lake, the gentle cadence of his voice as he told stories about our family's past. That place was where I became myself. Josh had barely visited in years, dismissing it as boring, always whining about the lack of Wi-Fi. And then in a flood of memory, I recalled the wooden cigar box Grandpa had pressed into my hands just 3 weeks before he passed. "Don't open this until the time is right," he had said, his weathered face softened by the mischievous twinkle I knew so well. My hands had trembled as I promised. Inside, I knew lay the truth he had wanted me to hold. Now, as I stared at my brother grinning beneath the glow of false triumph, I realized that time had come. I excused myself quietly, murmuring something about needing the bathroom, and slipped out of the room while the celebration swelled. In the hallway mirror, I caught sight of my own pale face, my lips pressed tight to contain the storm raging within me. The letter Josh displayed, it didn't make sense. Grandpa's handwriting had grown shaky from arthritis in his final months, but what I'd glimpsed looked too smooth, too steady, too perfect. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Jenna. "You okay?" That was weird. Josh never even cared about the cabin. I texted back quickly. "Need to check something at home. Can you cover for me?" She replied almost instantly. "Got it. I'll tell them you got called into work." With her cover, I slipped out the back door into the cool Denver night. My heart pounded as I drove through streets washed in the blurry glow of streetlights. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory, his laughter, his lessons. The cabin wasn't just land and timber. It was the embodiment of his values: resilience, patience, joy in simple things. The thought of Josh twisting it into a trophy for himself made bile rise in my throat. The moment I arrived home, I went straight to my closet and pulled out the wooden box. Its cedar scent greeted me like a memory of Grandpa himself. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were folded documents, a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's shaky script, and a small brass key that I recognized instantly, the key to his antique roll-top desk at the cabin. I unfolded the top document and gasped. A notarized deed transferring ownership of the lakeside cabin to me, dated 6 months earlier. My tears blurred the words as I pressed the paper to my chest. Grandpa hadn't just promised me the cabin, he had insured it legally. It was already mine. Then I opened the letter. "My dearest Jules, By the time you read this, I will likely be gone. I've decided to give you the cabin while I'm still alive to avoid any complications. You are the only one who has loved this place the way I did. Your brother never cared for it except when it could serve him. I know he may try to contest this, which is why everything is notarized and filed. Harold Thompson, my lawyer, has the copies. The cabin is yours already. Please protect it and let it remain a place of peace. With love, Grandpa. The words cut through me sharp and tender all at once. Relief mingled with sorrow until I could hardly breathe. Josh had lied. He had fabricated a letter stealing a legacy that had already been entrusted to me. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Josh himself. Nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin if you ask nicely. His audacity made my blood run cold. He knew. Somehow he knew Grandpa had left it to me. This wasn't ignorance, it was theft. I closed the box with trembling hands. I couldn't stay silent. Grandpa had trusted me to honor his wishes, and the truth had to be revealed. I wiped my face, steadied my breath, and slid the documents back into the box. Then I grabbed my car keys. The party would still be going. I would return not as the quiet, overlooked sister, but as the bearer of truth Grandpa had armed me with. As I drove back, memories of the cabin filled me like a tide. The porch swing where Grandpa and I shared secrets, the kitchen where we cooked pancakes together, the fireplace where he taught me patience with kind silence rather than lectures. That place wasn't just lumber and stone, it was the echo of a man's heart. And I would not let Josh desecrate it. When I reached his neighborhood, I parked a block away and sat with the wooden box on the passenger seat beside me. My fingers traced its worn edges as if Grandpa's hands still lingered there. My fear whispered that maybe I should wait. Maybe I should let the lawyer handle it. Maybe I should avoid the scene. But then another voice rose. The voice Grandpa had instilled in me over countless summers. When you have truth on your side, Jules, you don't need to shout it. The quiet truth hits harder than any loud lie. I stepped out of the car, box in hand, and walked toward the house glowing with laughter and light. My heart thundered, but my steps were steady. It was time for the truth to come out. The hum of voices swelled louder as I neared the front door, the warm glow spilling onto the porch. My hand hesitated on the knob, the wooden box heavy in my grip, my pulse pounding in my throat. For a moment, fear whispered to me again, "Turn around. Let the lawyer handle this. You don't have to fight him tonight." But then I thought of Grandpa, of his hands rough from years of work, but gentle when he rested them on my shoulders. I thought of the way he looked at me when he gave me the box, eyes filled with trust belief. I straightened my back and stepped inside. The room was still alive with laughter and chatter. Josh, ever the star of his own show, was standing with his arm draped over Teresa, telling someone about the renovations he planned for the cabin. Renovations. The word pierced me like a blade. He didn't even understand what that place was. It didn't need renovations, it needed reverence. "Jules," my mother said, spotting me from across the room, her smile wide, but her eyes narrowed. "We thought you left for good. What a time to vanish, huh?" She laughed as if I'd been rude for excusing myself, as if I didn't matter enough to have been shaken by Josh's announcement. Josh's smirk widened when he noticed the box in my arms. "Oh, look who's back," he said, raising his glass mockingly. "Couldn't handle the news, sis. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin when Teresa and I host family weekends." The smugness in his tone stirred something deep in me, something sharp, cold, and resolute. I walked toward the center of the room, the chatter quieting as people turned. I set the wooden box gently on the coffee table right on top of Josh's discarded glass, the sound echoing through the silence. "This," I said, my voice trembling at first but growing steadier, "is the truth Grandpa left behind." Confusion flickered across a few faces. Josh's smirk faltered just slightly. I opened the box and pulled out the envelope with my name written in Grandpa's shaky hand. My fingers brushed the letters, and I forced myself not to cry. 3 weeks before he passed, Grandpa gave me this. He told me not to open it until the time was right. Tonight, after hearing Josh's story, I knew the time had come. The time. Gasps rippled through the room. My father stepped forward, his brow furrowed. What are you saying, Jules? I drew out the notarized deed, unfolding it slowly, my hands steady now. I'm saying Grandpa already transferred the cabin to me. It's legally mine. 6 months ago, before any of this. It's signed, sealed, and notarized. And Harold Thompson, his lawyer, has copies. The silence that followed was suffocating. Josh's face drained of color. He stepped forward quickly, his voice rising. That's a lie. She's making it up. That paper could be anything. Enough. My voice cut through the air sharper than I'd ever heard myself sound. The room stilled. I kept quiet when you mocked me. I stayed silent when you tried to erase me. But not tonight. Grandpa knew you, Josh. He knew you'd try to twist his memory into a performance, into something that made you shine while the truth withered. That's why he gave me this. I held up the letter, Grandpa's words scrawled in his unmistakable handwriting. He said you never cared for the cabin. He said I was the only one who loved it the way he did. And he was right. You sneered at it, called it boring, complained there was nothing to do there. But to him and to me it was home. Teresa shifted uncomfortably, her hand slipping from Josh's arm. My mother's lips parted, her face pale. My father rubbed a hand over his jaw, silent as if wrestling with his thoughts. Josh lunged for the papers, but I stepped back, holding them out of reach. Jenna moved quickly, placing herself between us. Don't even think about it, Josh. She snapped, her voice strong. We all know Jules loved that cabin. Everyone knows it. The guests murmured in agreement. A few nodded, eyes wide with shock. My cousin David added quietly, Yeah, Josh. You never even wanted to go there unless Grandpa promised to bring extra snacks. A ripple of uneasy laughter followed, breaking the tension just enough for me to steady myself. Josh's voice cracked with desperation. She's lying. That can't be real. But my father finally spoke, his voice heavy. It is real. That's Grandpa's signature. I've seen it 1,000 times. He looked at Josh with disappointment etched across his face. Why would you do this? Why would you lie to all of us? Josh sputtered, his hands shaking. Because it's always been her. Grandpa always favored her. She got his attention, his weekends, his stories. And what did I get? Nothing, just the shadow of her perfection. For once, I wanted something that made me more than the second choice. His confessions stunned the room into silence. I felt my anger soften, replaced by something sadder, deeper. For all his arrogance, Josh was still just that boy chasing validation, desperate for scraps of approval. But pity didn't erase the damage he had done. I lifted my chin, my voice quiet but resolute. You wanted to be first, Josh. You wanted to win. Then understand this. Grandpa didn't measure us in victories or possessions. He measured us in love. And you never cared enough to even try. Josh's face crumpled. For the first time, he looked small. Teresa turned away, shame written across her expression. I placed the deed and letter carefully back into the box and closed the lid. This isn't a prize, I said softly, almost to myself. It's a trust. And I'll honor it no matter what it costs me. The room remained hushed, the weight of truth heavy in the air. Josh slumped into a chair, his bravado shattered. My mother's eyes shimmered with something unreadable, anger perhaps, or regret. My father stared at the floor, silent. I picked up the box again, holding it close. My legs trembled, but I stood tall. I'm leaving, I announced. I won't fight in front of everyone, but I won't let lies stand either. The cabin is mine, not because I demanded it, but because Grandpa believed I would keep it safe. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the door. Jenna followed, her hand on my shoulder, steadying me. As we stepped outside, the cool night air filled my lungs, cleansing me. Behind us, the murmurs of the crowd rose again, but I didn't care. I had spoken the truth. And for the first time in years, I felt Grandpa's pride like a hand on my back, pushing me forward. In the quiet of Jenna's car, she finally broke the silence. You were incredible in there. I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. No, I was terrified. Maybe, she said gently. But you were also brave. Grandpa would be so proud. Her words pierced me, softening the ache in my chest. I looked down at the box in my lap, the cedar scent filling the car. For the first time since Grandpa's death, I felt him close, not in the cabin, not in the stars, but in my own strength. The following days felt like moving through a storm's aftermath. The air was quieter, yes, but charged with unease, every conversation tinged with the echoes of what had erupted in Josh's living room. I woke the next morning to dozens of unread messages. Some from cousins who had been at the party, half shocked, half grateful I had spoken the truth. Some from family friends awkwardly apologizing for clapping too quickly when Josh made his announcement. And then there were the messages from my parents. My mother's first, "We need to talk. You shouldn't have embarrassed your brother like that," followed by my father's quieter but no less heavy, "Call me, please." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Even in the face of Josh's blatant lie, my mother found a way to make me the problem. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I set it face down and went to the window. The morning sun stretched across the street, and I thought of Grandpa again, how he'd sit at the cabin porch with his coffee telling me, "When the world feels heavy, jewels go outside. The weight is easier to bear under the open sky." So I did. I walked, block after block, until the air cooled my anger, until my steps steadied, until I could breathe again. By the time I returned, Jenna was waiting on my doorstep, 2 coffees in hand. "You didn't answer my texts," she said, her eyes full of worry. I couldn't, I admitted, taking the cup. I didn't want to hear their voices in my head anymore. We sat at my kitchen table, the cedar box between us like a silent witness. Jenna tapped it lightly. "You know you did the right thing, don't you?" "Yes," I said, though the word felt fragile. "But why does it still hurt?" "Because you love them," she said simply. "And they keep proving they don't know how to love you back." Her words stung with their truth. I sipped the bitter coffee and let silence stretch between us. Later that week, I went to see Harold Thompson, Grandpa's lawyer, just as the letter had said. Harold was an older man with kind eyes, his office lined with shelves of neatly organized binders. He greeted me warmly and handed me copies of everything Grandpa had arranged, the deed, the notarized documents, even a statement Grandpa had written in his own hand about why he wanted me to have the cabin. "He was very clear," Harold said, sliding the papers across the desk. "He anticipated there might be resistance from your brother. That's why he was thorough." I traced the signature at the bottom of one document, my chest tightening with both grief and gratitude. "He knew me better than anyone," I whispered. Harold nodded. "He trusted you. That cabin was his soul, and he knew you were the one to carry it forward." Walking out of the office with the documents clutched to my chest, I felt both stronger and lonelier. The law was on my side, Grandpa was on my side, but my parents weren't. And neither was my brother. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was Josh. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me, some mix of anger and duty, made me swipe the screen. His voice was raw, less sure than usual. "You ruined everything," he spat. "No, Josh," I said, my voice calm. "You did that yourself." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're better than me? You think you deserve that cabin more. You were always Grandpa's favorite, and now you get to flaunt it like a trophy." "It's not a trophy," I snapped, my patience thinning. "It's a trust. And you lied to everyone, tried to steal it. That's on you, not me." There was a pause. Then his voice cracked, almost boyish in its desperation. "He never loved me like he loved you. Do you know what it's like to be second every single day of your life?" The words pierced me because I did know. Maybe not with Grandpa, but with Mom always living in the shadow of Josh's supposed perfection. I understood the hunger for approval, the ache of never being enough. But sympathy didn't erase responsibility. "You chose to lie, Josh. You chose to turn your pain into a weapon against me. That's not my fault." The line went quiet. Then, with a coldness that made my skin prickle, he said, "This isn't over." And he hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, the silence ringing louder than his threat. In the weeks that followed, the family fractured further. My mother took Josh's side, openly telling anyone who would listen that I had disrespected my brother's moment. She insisted Grandpa had been confused in his final months, that surely he hadn't known what he was doing when he gave me the cabin. But Dad was different. Quietly, he reached out. One evening, he came to my apartment alone, carrying a box of old photographs. "These were your grandfather's," he said softly, placing them on my table. We sifted through the images together, Grandpa on the dock, Grandpa teaching me to ride a bike, Grandpa laughing with Josh when we were little. For a while, the bitterness between us melted into memory. Dad finally sighed. Your brother is angry, and your mother, she doesn't want to see the truth. But I know what I saw that night. And I know what kind of person you are. You were always the one who stayed by your grandfather's side. That cabin belongs with you. Tears welled in my eyes as I whispered thank you. It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was something. A crack in the wall of disappointment, a light shining through. Still, the weight of division pressed heavily. Family dinners became impossible. Invitations stopped coming. The group chat grew silent. My absence and Grandpa's choice had become the family's wound, one they seemed more eager to blame me for than to heal. In the quiet of my apartment, I found myself drawn more and more to the cabin. Weekends became pilgrimages to the lake. I would unlock the door, step inside, and breathe in the scent of cedar and memories. I'd sit on the porch swing, listening to the wind ripple across the water, and imagine Grandpa beside me, his presence as steady as the stars he once pointed out. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the water gold, I whispered into the air, "I hope I'm doing right by you." The lake answered with silence, but in that stillness I felt peace. Yet the peace was fragile. I knew Josh wasn't finished. His bitterness had roots too deep to simply die away. And my mother's denial only watered them. The storm wasn't over. It had only shifted. I knew the storm wasn't finished when a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox 2 weeks later, its return address stamped with a Denver law firm. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a formal letter. Josh was contesting Grandpa's deed. He claimed Grandpa had been of unsound mind when he signed it, that I had undue influence over him, and that the cabin should rightfully be part of the estate for equal distribution. The words made bile rise in my throat. Undue influence. Unsound mind. Grandpa had been sharp as ever until the end. He had beaten me at chess only 2 months before he passed his mind as quick as the snap of his fingers. This was Josh's desperation given legal form, his refusal to accept that Grandpa had chosen me, not him. I called Harold Thompson immediately. His voice was calm, steady, reassuring. "Don't worry, Jules. We anticipated this. Your grandfather prepared everything carefully. We have medical records, witness signatures, notarization. Josh doesn't have a case, he just wants to rattle you." But even if the law was on my side, the wound of betrayal ran deeper than paperwork. This wasn't about legalities. This was about my brother clawing at me with every ounce of resentment he had carried all his life. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice slithered through the line. "You think you've won, don't you?" "Josh," I said, exhausted. "Stop this, you're only making it worse for yourself." "No," he hissed. "You've always been the golden one, Grandpa's pet. Now you're flaunting his favoritism with that cabin. But I won't let you keep it. I'll drag you through court, I'll drain you until you have nothing left." I hung up before he could continue. My hands trembled as I locked the door and double-checked the windows. It wasn't just about the cabin anymore, it was about survival. The following days blurred together in a haze of lawyer meetings and restless nights. Harold remained confident, but I felt the strain building inside me, pressing against my ribs like a weight I couldn't lift. My mother fueled the fire, calling relatives, spinning the narrative that I had manipulated Grandpa in his final months. Family who once sent me warm holiday cards now avoided me. At the grocery store, an aunt turned her cart sharply away when she saw me. The isolation gnawed at me until I couldn't tell if I was angry or just hollow. When it became too much, I fled to the cabin. The moment I unlocked the door, a wave of calm washed over me. Dust motes floated in the beams of sunlight streaming through the windows. The scent of cedar and lake air filled my lungs, soothing my frayed nerves. I dropped my bag and collapsed into Grandpa's old armchair, the one where he had read his newspapers every morning. The cushions sagged in familiar comfort, wrapping me in memory. For hours I sat there in silence, the only sounds the ticking of the old clock on the mantel and the soft lap of water against the shore. Slowly my breath evened, my mind quieted. It was there in that stillness that I realized what Josh could never understand. The cabin wasn't about possession. It wasn't about power, it was about presence. About roots sunk deep into the earth, about belonging to something larger than yourself. Josh wanted it as a trophy, a symbol of victory. But for me it was home. I rose and wandered through the rooms, running my fingers along the worn wooden walls. In the kitchen, I remembered flipping pancakes with Grandpa, his laughter booming when I dropped one on the floor. In the bedroom, I remembered curling up beside him during thunderstorms, his steady voice telling me stories of our ancestors. On the porch, I remembered sitting with him in silence, the two of us watching stars blink awake. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, I won't let him destroy this. I promise. That weekend, I invited Jenna to join me. She arrived with groceries and a bottle of wine, her presence a balm against the ache of solitude. We cooked together, we laughed, we talked late into the night. At one point, she looked at me across the table and said, You know this cabin isn't just Grandpa's anymore. It's yours. And you're already keeping his spirit alive here. Her words steadied me. But the storm followed us even here. On Sunday afternoon, as we sat on the porch, a car pulled into the gravel drive. My stomach sank as I recognized it Josh's. He got out, his face pale but burning with anger. So this is your kingdom now, he sneered, gesturing to the cabin. Sitting up here like you're queen of the lake. Josh, I said, standing tall, Jenna at my side, you need to leave. Not until you admit it, he snapped, that you manipulated him, that you stole this from me. I clenched my fists. I didn't steal anything. Grandpa chose me. And you know why? Because I cared. Because I was here. Because I loved him for who he was, not for what he could give me. His eyes glistened, fury and pain battling within him. You think you're better than me? No, I said softly. I think I loved him in ways you never let yourself. For a moment, his shoulders sagged, his anger faltering. But then he shook his head, the mask snapping back into place. This isn't over, he growled before turning and storming back to his car. As the engine roared away, Jenna exhaled shakily. He's unraveling. Yes, I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded. But so am I, and I won't let him take me down with him. That night, I lit a fire in the cabin's hearth. The flames crackled, casting warmth through the room. I sat cross-legged on the rug, the cedar box in front of me. I reread Grandpa's letter, his words glowing in the firelight. Protect it. Let it remain a place of peace. A place of peace. That was my mission now, not just legally, not just for myself, but for him. I leaned back, watching sparks spiral upward into the chimney. And for the first time since his death, I felt certain I was strong enough to keep my promise. But strength came with a cost, and I knew the fight with Josh was only sharpening. The day of the hearing dawned, cold and gray clouds heavy over the Denver courthouse. I stood outside with Harold by my side, clutching the cedar box against my chest. The weight of it had grown familiar over the past weeks, as though Grandpa himself resided inside, steadying me for this moment. Josh arrived flanked by my mother, her lips pressed into a thin line of resolve. Teresa wasn't with him. I suspected she'd grown tired of the storm he carried. His eyes locked on mine with a mixture of fury and desperation. He looked smaller than he had at his housewarming, though his arrogance still clung to him like ill-fitting armor. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings began with formality. But beneath the polished words and polite gestures, I felt the sharp current of betrayal humming. Josh's lawyer painted a picture of manipulation, of a frail old man coerced by a scheming granddaughter. My stomach twisted at every falsehood, every twisted detail, but I kept my face calm. Then it was Harold's turn. He presented the notarized deed, the medical records proving Grandpa's mental clarity, and the statement Grandpa had written in his own hand. He read it aloud, each word cutting through the lies like a blade. I give this cabin to Jules because she has always loved it, as I have. She has cared for it, preserved it, and I know she will continue to protect it. Tears filled my eyes as I listened. Grandpa's voice lived in those words. They wrapped around me like his arms used to when I was a child. When it was my turn to speak, I rose, my legs trembling. The judge's eyes were kind, inviting honesty. I took a deep breath. My grandfather was not confused. I said, my voice soft but firm. He was deliberate. Every summer, every weekend, I sat with him in that cabin. I painted the porch railings with him. I fixed the leaky roof. I learned his stories by heart. That place wasn't about money or property. It was about legacy. And he knew who cherished it, who saw it as more than just a house on a lake. I paused, steadying myself. My brother wasn't there. And that's not an accusation, it's just the truth. He didn't want to be. And that's fine. But to stand here and say I manipulated Grandpa is not only false, it's cruel. Grandpa made his choice with love, not coercion. He trusted me, and I will not betray that trust. Silence followed, heavy and complete. Josh shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw tight. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before she finally spoke. The evidence is clear. The cabin legally and rightfully belongs to Jules. The contest is dismissed. The gavel struck, the sound echoing like thunder. Relief flooded me, hot tears spilling down my cheeks. Harold squeezed my shoulder gently. "It's done," he whispered. But victory tasted bittersweet. Across the aisle, Josh slumped, his face twisted with defeat and bitterness. My mother rubbed his back, glaring at me as though I were the villain. In that moment, I understood something I had dreaded, but always known: winning the cabin meant losing them. I walked out of the courthouse into the gray light, the cedar box clutched close. Jenna waited for me on the steps, her arms open wide. I fell into her embrace, sobbing against her shoulder. "It's mine," I choked out. "It's really mine." "Of course it is," she murmured. "It always was." That weekend I returned to the cabin alone. The lake was still, the air crisp with early morning quiet. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, setting the cedar box on the table. The weight lifted from my chest at last. I lit a fire in the hearth, the flames crackling warmly. Sitting on the porch swing, I watched the sun rise over the water, painting the world in gold. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt peace deep in my bones. I thought of Josh, of my mother, of the wreckage left behind. A part of me grieved the family I had lost, but another part, stronger, steadier, whispered, "You are free now." The cabin was more than wood and stone. It was a promise. Grandpa's promise to me and my promise to him. To keep it safe, to let it remain a place of peace. As the sun climbed higher, I spoke softly into the morning air. "I did it, Grandpa. I kept your trust. I'll make sure this place is always what you wanted it to be." And in the hush that followed, with the lake shimmering and the trees swaying gently, I felt him there. Not in the bitterness of the courtroom, not in the brokenness of family ties, but here where love had always lived. I breathed deeply, the scent of cedar and firewood filling me. The scars would remain. The family rift might never heal, but I had reclaimed more than a cabin. I had reclaimed myself. And that was enough.